Thank you very much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark, and if you want to know more about me, you can join me at thevoiceofjobseekers.com. You can call and leave voicemail at 708-365-9822 or text your comments to the same number. You can also, when you go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com, you can press the send voicemail button to the right of any page, and you can leave me a message there. Anything from comments about the show to just some thoughts about what we talked about in our episodes. You can also send email feedback to mark at thevoiceofjobseekers.com. Just want to place a couple of announcements before we get in today's show. One is in the next week or two, you're going to see several shows come out as I have a few extra bits of content that I want to get out. Not sure exactly how I want to present it, but I definitely want you to enjoy it. So look forward to that in your podcast feed. If not, you can find the Voice of Job Seekers just about on any podcast directory, including the popular ones like iHeart, Spotify, TuneIn, of course, Apple Podcasts. You can feel free to look for it and leave me a review. Let me know what you think about the show. The other thing I want to be sure that you knew about was about the 421 Modern Job Search Tips 2021. There's been a little bit of delay on it. It should be coming soon. When it does come, I'll be sure to announce it, and that you'll get that you be sure to look out for how you can get your copy. If this is the first time you've heard of it, feel free to go to voicejobseeker.com, sign up on the right-hand side to the upcoming ebook that I have. It's about 125 pages plus, and it has more than 421 job search tips. Try to organize it the best way I can. I think this might be the last year I'll release them at that volume. I think what I'll do is I'll release addendums from here on in, so that way, as you need it, you can just sign up for the ones that you want, of course. The other thing is I want to just be sure that you look for me on my live streams on LinkedIn. I have some shows coming up. I do 2 live streams, one with Jack Kelly. He is the CEO of WeRecruiter.io. And you can always look him up on LinkedIn as Jack Kelly. The other live show I do is with Damian Burkle. It's possible that I won't have a live stream this coming Friday if you just happen to be on Tuesday, November 10th. So I don't think we're going to have a show then. But we will have shows on subsequent Fridays, of course. And every Wednesday for that show with Jack Kelly. We don't have a particular name for it. We just go out there and do our thing. We answer questions. And we try to generously give as many tips for your job search as possible. Definitely join us for this Wednesday. Hannah Morgan is going to join us on the live stream. And that's for Wednesday. For many of you, it would be today, Wednesday, November 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern. 12 p.m. Eastern, which is a time change. We usually do it at 1 p.m. Nevertheless, I want to introduce today's show. It'll be a long interview that will be presented today. Kenneth L. Johnson, he's the president of East Coast Executives. He's been in the game for 20 plus years. He's a diversity recruiter. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's been featured in Forbes. He works with Google. He works with Indeed. He works with the New York Urban League on a show. He also does a career seeker show for 106.5 FM WPPM in Philadelphia. He does a lot of stuff. But he is definitely a master recruiter and also a great networker, and I want to have him on to talk about networking. So I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a ring or send me a note via the ways that we talked about. In the meantime, enjoy the show. Harris is a business and career coach. But even more special, I want you to give a little bit of background. I don't usually ask people their background because people can go and see, but they'll understand why this might be a little bit different than all the others that I tend to interview and talk to on a regular basis.
Okay, so my background is I started off in stockbroking as a trader. I was a bit of a kind of square peg in a round hole. A lot of you might be able to relate to that. So I was trying to find my dream career. I thought I'd make a lot of money. That's what I wanted to do. That didn't suit me. So then I ended up doing a law degree. That didn't suit me. And then I really just pursued my real passion, which was to be an entrepreneur. I bought a tiny little cake shop in 2001. And I managed to transform that cake shop into a #1 national brand in Australia, and it went global. And I had the biggest cake decorating school in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's kind of like the Cake Boss, but for the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had my own TV show. I published 5 books. And what I discovered my real skill is strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I was ready to go into my next business. So I'd finished with that in 2014. I'd really had enough of cakes. If I had to look at another cake, I was going to kind of, do something terrible. And so I was about to go into my next business. And then I just saw this real gap in the market in terms of this huge shift and pivot and change in terms of how people were getting jobs and how businesses were struggling to stand out. And I recognized that I had the skill and talent in brand creation and strategy to really help these people, and hence what I'm doing now, which is really around career and business strategy.
Right. Now, when you strategize with your clients, mostly you're strategizing from both sides, from perhaps the hiring side and also those who are looking for new opportunities, and perhaps executives or people who are seeking the upper level of management as opposed to the mid to lower career level.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
What I really specialize in is turning people into #1 brands, whether they're working for a company and they're an entrepreneur, or whether they're a business. They usually come to me because they're plateaued, as you said, or they're failing to thrive, or they've just hit a ceiling, or they feel that they've got these talents that are not being utilized in this career they're particularly in. That's what I specialize in. People coming to me saying, I need a career change, but I just don't know where to next. So some of my clients, it's probably better to give you some examples. I had a lawyer that came to me really desperately unhappy from family law. I turned her business into a workplace bullying expert in mediation, dealing with workplace bullying investigations. She's absolutely in seventh heaven, and she's now one of the leading experts in Australia. I had a communications expert come to me, and I basically transformed her into a kind of Rebrand Australia campaign person that advises CEOs on legacy. So what I tend to do in the career part of what I do is I entrepreneur them. So I go in there and I say, I'm not interested in your career and what a career coach might tell you. What I'm interested in is what makes you really special and what you can offer a company. So I look at them like a business. And as an entrepreneur, I then say to them, this is how you would market yourself. And these are the type of companies that would be really interested in hiring you. And this is where you could thrive. Because I'm coming from a business perspective.
Sure. More or less, you help them become what I call a consultant in their area.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually got that from you. I love that. Think like a consultant.
Yeah. Well, I think what it is that, branding could be talked about as a really strategic, intentional path that people can go down to, and to understand what the core parts of what the expectations are, or they can go and talk about it, or approach it nebulously without really establishing a firm foundation. I mean, to me, it's almost like there's a building in San Francisco that instead of putting the foundation in the bedrock, they put it in the earth, in the soil. So the building shifts a little bit to the right,
And because it shifted, it has lost its value. There are people who have it,
Right.
they can't resell their condos anymore in it. So we
Yeah.
call it Millennial Tower. And
Right.
it's kind of a lot like that because people don't find a foundation in their branding. Uh,
Mm.
they begin to shift, and no
Mm.
telling how that shift will affect the other buildings around it, or
Mm.
whether that they'll be able to find somebody to be interested. But nobody's not going to be interested in a leaning building, just like nobody's not going to be as much as interested in a branding that's not solid in
Yeah.
bedrock.
Yeah. I also find I'm really surprised because I've been an entrepreneur for 2 decades now. And
Hmm.
so, I run to the beat of my own drum.
Yeah.
I get really surprised at how toxic a lot of the environments people have worked in
Hmm.
and the impact that bad bosses or being in the wrong job can have on people's identity and view of themselves.
Yeah.
So I find a lot of people coming to me that aren't actually working to their natural strengths. And
Mm.
when you remind them, this is actually what you're really good at. Like you're really good at building relationships. This is where you add value. You absolutely shine when you do this. Suddenly a little bell goes on. Wow, I do remember that. That's what I was going to, well, that's what we're going to market the heck out of you. Because
Yeah.
when you do that, you're in flow. You're,
Yeah.
you're in your genius then. So we need
Yeah.
to package you up like that. Otherwise, you're going to have more of these jobs that are draining and demoralizing. So I think that it's really difficult when you're in the inside to have a look at yourself, isn't it? And
It
to
is. It is.
to see what's special about you and what sets you apart. I think that is the advantage of having a coach or a mentor, but also you can go, I recommended to someone last week that came to me as a pro bono, and I just said, go around to people that you've worked with and ask how you add value to them. I think you might be really surprised.
Right. And I think sometimes you just need somebody else to tell you
Yeah.
that you add value in that way, and you need some points of validation. Not that
Yeah.
you need to please anybody, but you want to find out, you know, the magic touch.
Mm.
Where do you actually make magic?
Yep.
And everybody makes it in different ways, and most people don't realize where they do or how they do until
Yep.
somebody has told them, or that they see there's a revelation somewhere along the line. So I know that you're strategic in the way that you approach this.
Mm.
Well, what are some of the core things that people can do? We talked about branding, we talked about marketing. Those are two
Mm.
key points.
Mm.
Most people will get on board with the brand part,
Mm.
but they find it very hard to get on the marketing part. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and marketing yourself is difficult, and I get it. So I give people the introvert's guide to marketing because I'm
Hmm.
an introvert and I
Right.
hate selling myself. It's so embarrassing. I'm
Hmm.
a real like pearl clutcher, if you can see
Hmm.
me right now with you. I'm very conservative. I'm quite quiet. And
Hmm.
so what I like to do is I really like to use LinkedIn, and I use a lot of pro bono work because I'm not a go to a party type of person. I'm not pick up the phone and like invite someone out to coffee. They are the best ways of doing it. And if you're an extrovert, knock yourself out doing that. But I'm not. And so I'm not going to advise you to do it if it makes you feel uncomfortable. And during these times, it's not possible anyway.
Right.
But what I like to do is I really like to add value to people. And so on LinkedIn, I do that by supporting other people's content, direct messaging them, telling them that I loved a piece that they did, sending people links, organizing little Zoom chats, and introducing myself. LinkedIn is just an absolute, it's a powerhouse, a networking powerhouse. I don't have to leave my lounge room, and I'm hosting webinars, doing speaking gigs, and getting work from all around the world because of LinkedIn. It is beyond belief powerful.
And you've done this mostly in the past 3 years, right?
Well, yeah, I didn't really start taking LinkedIn seriously for about 12 months. So
Hmm.
and when I first started, I was hopeless. So I would put up a post and I'd just get crickets. Maybe one of my friends would come along and like it, and that was it. Nothing was happening.
Yeah.
And I felt very uncomfortable on the platform. I wasn't very comfortable with social media. But since then, I've kind of developed a formula and I understand it. Like any social media platform, it has its own cultural norms, as you would know very well.
Mm-hmm.
And it has its way of networking. And I think that the big mistake is people approach it like a Facebook or people approach it like an Instagram, and LinkedIn isn't like that at all. LinkedIn is a networking platform. So you have to work the digital room on LinkedIn. And by doing that, so I did that for 3 months before I posted again. And I now have a really quite a large network that I really enjoy interacting with, and it brings me work and brings opportunities to me.
Yeah. And I think too is that you don't take for granted at all. Now, I want to give a little context to some of your background. You kind of passed by it, but your cake company is truly global. Now, from what I remember, some of your clients have been like Rihanna, right?
Yes, that's true.
Keith Urban.
Yes.
And there are some others that those are the first two that but you had a true global business. People, you were the go-to person. So you knew what that's like, but yet you told us, I know that you are, but you told us that you're an introvert.
Yes. So I tell you how I do it, how I build brands, and it's such a powerful way, but it takes longer and everyone wants something immediately. But it's the same way you find your dream job. You do it one person at a time. So I'll give you a great story about that.
Okay.
I had someone come into my cake shop. She was dressed a bit shabbily and she was a bit kind of demanding. She was a nice lady, but she was a bit off and she didn't have much money to spend. So my cakes average sale about $3,000 each. I'm not going to go into that side of my story now, but I can hear you all drop the mic on the other side there, but no. And she had $100 to spend, right? So we weren't going to make any money out of her. And most people would consider her to be a bit of a pest. And she wanted something special for her husband's birthday. Anyway, it didn't matter. Because I do things one person at a time, I build experiences and brands one person at a time. She was an opportunity. And so I just thought, even if she goes out and tells a couple of people, it's worth my time. So I invested in her. I did something special for her. We made no money out of her. She was a little bit painful, but she went out happy as Larry. I gave her 5-star service and I really spent some time with her. I could on that particular day. I'm not saying to ignore real business by doing stuff like that. Anyway, a year passes. I didn't give that lady a single thought. And Celine Dion's management called and wanted me to not only make Celine Dion's 40th birthday cake, but to come and meet her and meet all her staff and meet her husband and work with her group and work with her tour group. And that was a huge, huge job for us. And Celine Dion was probably my favorite celebrity that I met, all from that lady with the $100 cake from the year before.
Yeah.
Now, the power of that story is you never know who you're speaking to. You never know who they know, and you never know when it's going to come back to you. But it's all just one person at a time.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things that you did. I would have liked to think I would approach it like that. I'm not sure if I would have, but because you're serving at the top of mind, that it was an opportunity to serve, that you offered value and it made its way back, was the main thing I probably got the most out of. And because you do that, and I can say that about you because I've seen you over the years now.
Yeah.
You give, you comment, you like, you offer. It's just help. I don't know when I've seen you ask for anything, which is, and that's the right way of doing it. because most people are looking to have that magic question at the magic time to to have the moment where the stars and the moon align, and it doesn't happen that way. It's going to happen because it's like one brick at a time. It's not very sexy, but
Yeah.
after you do it for a while, you do build something.
Yeah, and I think maybe social media has kind of given that now looks very old fashioned and like hard work, and that it takes
Right.
too long, and we watch people blow up on social media really quickly. I work with a lot of influencers. That's part of my job, is making people famous, because I was able to do it for myself, and so I do it for other people.
Right.
And what I can tell you is that many of them blow up and blow away just as quickly. There's no longevity there. And it's all just kind of marketing fluff. There's very little monetization in the back end. And there's very few people that are able to make it work for themselves. What I have seen is the best strategy is the one I just gave, which is person by person by person. And it's amazing how deep it goes. It goes on for years. I've got people giving me favors now that I did a favor for 12 years ago. It just goes on and on.
It does. It really does. But I think, again, you have a foundation.
Yeah.
And the foundations, and again, using my analogy, the foundation's in the bedrock. It's not just in the sand. It's not just in the soil. When it's in the bedrock, it's there. And it doesn't move with the wind, doesn't move with much turbulence. It is something that it grounds. And you use this process constantly, and I think you use it even unconsciously at this particular point.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not going to get all religious on you, but I don't believe anything's by accident. God looks after me, and everyone that's put in my path is put there for a reason, and I'm there to serve him. And so that's kind of just my life, so I just wake up each day and just think, wow, what's on today? So I guess if I was a job seeker right now, and I have started businesses and whatever, I think I work 40 to 50 hours a week, right? Just because I don't have a job doesn't mean I'm not working.
Right.
So I would be out saying, well, who am I going to be adding value to today? Can I work pro bono for someone? Can I help my friend with their business? Can I be operating in a charity? Can I be doing some, I do about 2 hours work on LinkedIn a day networking. That's what it takes. Where can I devote my time to LinkedIn today? So I guess that's kind of the way I approach things. Like, whether I'm getting paid for it or not, I still work.
Yeah.
Still serve.
Yeah, and I think that's that's solid. It's harder for some people to do than others because they
Much harder.
have a limiting belief about their ability. And they're in the way they come across. They're thinking about their insecurities.
Yeah.
They're thinking, well, maybe I really don't want to do. I don't want to do all of that. That may be true, but if you want all of that,
yes,
and you don't do all of that, you can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah, I have a lot of that really surprised me, that people have limiting beliefs about themselves. I know that sounds really naive, but I just think to myself, why would you think that about yourself? Everybody has something wonderful to offer.
Sure.
I've never met a single person that doesn't have something special about them. I met a young man the other week that was like that. And at the end of the day, we worked out that what he was really brilliant at was interpreting data, and he could do that at home, not interacting with anyone, and still shine like a star. You don't have to kind of do what I advise to do in terms of human interaction. Just start off nice and easy. Just because the more you go out there and just nibble at little bits, and LinkedIn is such a good way to go out there and just nibble at little bits. You can do it while you're sitting in your pajamas. You don't have to put yourself right out there. Your confidence will build, and it builds and it builds. I left school. I wasn't brilliant, and I certainly didn't have much confidence in myself. And I came from kind of, the suburbs in Sydney, and I was very uncool. I am still so uncool. Like, if someone's going to put their foot in their mouth, it'll be me. But over time, and that's why I advise to add value, because people really appreciate that. Just, adding value, being helpful, not trying to be cool, not trying to have the right personal brand, not trying to be, look mega successful, but just adding value at what you're good at.
Hmm.
people really remember and appreciate that.
Sure.
And just bite off a little bit.
It's the
Just,
Popeye syndrome. Is I am what I am, and
yeah,
I've just got to be comfortable enough to present it to the world.
yeah,
It doesn't take a lot of polishing, if any at all, for most people to realize it. I mean, people think when you first say brand, they think, oh, it's Celine Dion, or
yeah,
they think Rihanna.
yes,
Well,
yeah,
but it's not. People are kind of, they think of someone else so big and they think of themselves so small,
yeah,
that you know it takes time, and you
yeah.
got to give yourself time, but it also just take having a vision. Just there's no one way to get there. And you might meet a coach, you might meet somebody who has one way to get there, but
Yeah.
that's not going to be your way either, even if they're a good coach.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. And in fact, it has to be suitable to your personality type and your inclination. There's no point in giving someone a big full on personal branding and networking strategy if they're an introvert and they're not comfortable with that. I
Right.
think the simplest way to look at it is just pick your top three values. Mine are collaboration, kindness, and education.
Mhm.
And I just go out there, and if every person I meet says, wow, that Paris is just so helpful, and I learned something today, and I love being on her team or, collaborating with her, that's a win.
Yeah, and I think people should look for this. Start with the smaller wins. If you got on and made a
Mm.
comment today, that's a win. Um,
Yeah.
and stop looking at the peripheral stuff that everybody else starts, because people, you know, views and likes and all those things are, they're not all as they cracked up to be. In fact, there are times when I didn't have any likes at all, but somebody was
Yeah.
appreciating what I did because of what I said. So not
Yeah.
everything that's going to be brilliant is going to receive like or 100 likes or 1,000 likes. Those are rare. It gets into your face because LinkedIn's algorithm shows the 1,000 likes or
Yeah.
the 500 likes, and most people, probably 99% of the rest of us, don't get that at all, if at any time. So don't get discouraged because you're not getting those things. Look for places where you can add value and think of that as a win more so than what you're getting.
I would actually say, I mean, I post about 3 or 4 times a week on LinkedIn, and I actually look after a couple of my clients are big LinkedIn influencers, so nearly 1 million followers, and they post every day. And we would all agree that the most important thing about LinkedIn is commenting on other people's posts and networking rather than posting. That's where the power is.
Hmm.
So I actually notice people that comment on my posts all the time and interact with me all the time
Hmm.
rather than what people post. I'm noticing the connections. A lot of people will direct message me, ask me for help or advice, or send me something or comment on a post that I made. They're the people I notice, is the people that are interacting in my feed. So don't think that that's not valuable, and don't think that influencers don't notice. They really, really do. And on that note, I've actually got something brand new that I just created that
Okay.
I'm happy to give to your listeners. And that is, I developed something called the ACE method for LinkedIn, which is how to get likes and interaction on your posts when you post. It's just a free resource. But ACE stands for algorithm, content, and engagement. It's just a method to make sure that you do have one or two, that you don't put it up there and it's crickets like I experienced, that you do actually get some interaction, and obviously making sure that people, connect with you on LinkedIn, connect with me and other guests that you have on your podcast, because knowing where they've heard about me, I'm going to start following them and interacting with them because I care about you as my friend. And so
Mhm.
all of your listeners I'm going to care about. And
Yeah.
that's how a network works.
Yes,
It's
it does.
just,
It does. And um, it's rare when people reach out to you and all they want to do is give, and they don't ask a single thing. And
yeah.
Paris, I can really say that about you, is that I think it was you reached out to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And because of an old interview, no
Mm.
less.
Hmm.
Uh, and you've been a giver. That's all I know. Like I said, I rarely see you ask. So this is really the first time I think I've seen you ask for something, which is
Oh.
remarkable. So I'll be sure you pass that link to me, and I'll make sure it's available. It'll
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah. I just
because
think, it's free, and it might be helpful to your listeners. But I mean, I do think it's as simple as that. So I listened to an interview that you did. I found you on LinkedIn. I reached out, never knew you from Adam, and I DM'd you
right.
and said, I loved your interview. I'm really impressed by you. You're doing great things in the career space, or something like that. I remember it because I remember the interview, and I honestly believed that.
Yeah.
And you responded, and that was the beginning of a friendship. So I guess for your listeners, it really is as simple as that.
Yep. And we're 15 hours apart.
I know. We're really isolated, Doug.
Right. So people can get a hold of you at pariscutler.com, correct?
Correct. That's correct.
And the latest is that we have all these different conditions now that people are not going to be able to impress people right in person as their first impression. Their first impression is going to be video, likely. So how are people in the 50 plus group handle it? Now, you and I, we're the exception. But everybody else, they're kicking and screaming, right?
Yeah, the key pieces, in fact, Mark and I were talking right before this about lighting and staging. And when you are on video, one of the things is you have to think about this. It's like Hollywood.
Right.
One of the biggest problems I see that people have is when they're on video is the audio is more important than the video.
Mm-hmm.
So for most of you, go buy a good microphone. And by the way, microphones don't have to be expensive. Right. I happen to have an ATR 2100, which is $60. Two, thinking about you're an actor. You're on video. Mm-hmm. So it is the lighting. It is what's behind you. We had a discussion on one call of where they were mentioning the fact there was a bookshelf behind this lady, and there were a bunch of her son's games on the, and they weren't very flattering for her.
Right.
So one of the things I recommend people to think about is watch the newscasters who are doing news from home. My favorite is PBS NewsHour. Mm-hmm. And watch what's behind them. One of the big ones I find right now is the Zoom backgrounds. And I tell people don't use them because I want the focus on you. But think about what's behind you brands you. So the class example years ago when I was working with my job club back in Austin, we had a guy came in and I was reviewing LinkedIn profiles. Mm-hmm. And this guy was an EDI guy, electronic data interchange. And his LinkedIn photo had a picture of him. What behind him was a bookshelf full of EDI books. Mm-hmm. And the titles were really large and really obvious that he knew his stuff. So think about, number one, as we've talked about before, what is your brand? And then how do you reproduce it? It's kind of like right now, right before the call, Mark and I were talking about the fact that he has his chapeau on, his hat. That's part of his brand. Mm-hmm. Okay, how does he get the best light on that hat and on his face so that he looks the way he wants to look. Yes, I know, guys, most of us don't really care, but you need to care how you look.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think one thing that we should keep in mind is that people, how should I say it? People, light matters, sound matters more. People get more frustrated when they can't hear you, not particularly more frustrating than when they see you. And so that could be quite a challenge in the long run if you don't have, if you're not testing quite a bit. And that's why it's good to talk to friends and get their opinion because they will tell you the truth more than likely, whether they can hear you or whether they can adequately see you. And you want to be both, but if you got to choose one priority over the other, choose sound.
Yeah. So the way I tell it is, having lived in Austin, Texas for 40 years, and where University of Texas football is not a sport, it's a religion. So if you're watching the UT football game, it's the national championship game, and it's on TV and there's a little bit of static, you'll put up with it.
Right.
You're listening in your car and you're listening to the radio and there's static. You turn it off.
Yeah.
We have a lower tolerance for bad audio than we do for bad video.
Yeah. And out of that is, if you have bad audio or if you can't adjust your audio, then that affects how people view you. They get out of it that you're unprepared. Maybe you don't care as much. And that's 101. We haven't even gotten to the meat of it. If you're not succeeding at least past the hello, how are you, and the exchange, then people would start to dismiss your possibilities.
Yeah, there's no question. It's also the kind of clothes you wear. By the way, how do the clothes come off on camera? You may notice when Mark and I meet every once in a while over a video, I always wear these long sleeve, solid color t-shirts. They're actually quite formal looking. Right. If I suddenly need to hop on a call and look professional, all I need to do is throw on my sports jacket. And I look sharp.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. So in the past, if suddenly someone calls you up and it's an interview and they say, "Can you talk?" Well, no one can see you. Right. If you're going to be suddenly stop on video, how do you make yourself look presentable quickly? And understanding clothing is really important. And put it bluntly, I have a horrible taste in clothes. Okay, I have an image consultant back in Austin who has picked out all my clothes.
Yeah. Well, I'm married to mine. She has great taste. Never has failed me in the almost 30 years we've been married.
Well, the point is, Mark, you're smart enough to know that.
Yeah. I didn't do bad myself. I worked in retail for many years, single, and had to, and some of it had to do with fashion and dressing. So
yes, well,
I'm not too bad. But all that being said, though, it's important. Your first impression on camera is going to matter as much as the impression you had when you're meeting, and you should take each of those meetings very seriously.
Yes.
And again, we're just talking about the starting line. We haven't gotten to the race yet.
You are correct.
Yeah. So, in your experience, do you feel like what's missing in the translation from real life to virtual life for the for for us older folks. Surely it can't be for the fact that we're just meeting people in a different way and we're delivering our messages in a different way. So what's getting lost in the transition? Why are people, those of us who are 50 plus, seem to be kicking and screaming when somebody says you got to do something virtually?
Well, it's as much as anything right now, being comfortable being in front of the camera and creating your own video.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. I've been a public speaker for much of my career, and I'm still not comfortable standing in front of the camera by myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like producing my podcasts.
Yeah.
The hardest podcasts I do are my solo podcasts, where I'm just standing in front of a computer and speaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So learning how to produce short videos that brand you, deliver your message, because by the way, you're not going to meet these people face to face like you did before.
Right.
I don't know when we will have networking events again.
Not in person.
When will that happen? Getting comfortable with multi-way Zoom calls.
Mm-hmm.
I'll use the example. I had Wendy Mayhew, who wrote the book Wiser, and I was in on some of her book launch books, on some of her book launch Zoom calls. And I was real surprised there would be 30 or 40 of us on there. Afterwards, I had 4 or 5 people reach out to me and say, can we connect on LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
At that point, we didn't schedule a phone call. We scheduled a Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
And to many of us, that's kind of, you're going to do what? And in many ways, it's easier.
It sure is.
And one of the key pieces, one of the things that's changed in the, I like to say, the pandemic, the 2020 great pandemic, is the fact that, by the way, we're not traveling. We're home more.
Mm-hmm.
We have more time. So never has it been easier to be able to get a hold of somebody, and 2, actually schedule a call with them.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can do it on video, the better than having a phone call.
Sure.
And I use the example, my last corporate gig was as the training and learning and development manager for Life Size Communications, which was the original HD video conferencing company, which I left 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left, I was really surprised. I had any number of people who I had maybe met face-to-face one time,
Right.
who I had close relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorites was, I'll just call her Emily. She was our coordinator in Hong Kong. And Emily was probably in her late 20s, early 30s, educated in the UK, but she was born and raised in Hong Kong. She used to refer to me as Uncle Mark.
And I've heard that.
Right. And well, I was, 30 plus years her senior,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, she was using it as an endearing response.
Yes.
Right. And I had any number of people where I went, wow. And I have friends to this day from that period, and we never met face to face. And so one of the things, there's a big belief in our generation that
Mm-hmm.
the only way you can develop a good relationship is by meeting face to face and shaking someone's hand. Well, we may never shake hands again. Who knows?
Right. Well, the new personal relationship is whether I can text you right away or not, and you can respond anytime. or Zoom
Well,
time, or
it's
whatever the just having the access is the new personal relationship. Not particularly do I have access to you in person, and whether you live around the corner or in the city.
okay, Mark. Have we ever met face to face?
No, sir.
Okay, this is a classic example.
Yeah.
I consider you to be my friend, my colleague. If I need something, I know I can come ask for it,
Right.
which is what I consider a good connection,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, therefore, the key piece here is you don't have to meet face to face,
Right.
but you have to, in many ways, developing these relationships is harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's changing the paradigm.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the key things that you can do is you can decide how you want to be perceived.
Mm-hmm.
That's your personal brand.
And that's a large part of it, because you want it's communication 101, really. It's just delivered a little bit different. And that is, if you want to be successful and to be a great communicator, you've got to be able to communicate in a way that the message is received the same way you want to communicate it. If you're missing the mark and it's not happening all the time, you can't necessarily blame it on virtual. And you can't blame it on the camera for misconstruing your message, or because people don't see your hand gestures, or they can't see the expression on your face. They only can see basically by the sound of your voice and the tone of your voice. And that's going to come across through the phone, through the video, no matter what the situation is going to be. But ultimately, if you're not a good communicator and you have problems communicating, it's going to be hard for you to communicate your brand and come across in a way that people want to hire you for either business or for employment. It won't matter.
Right. So again, what's a personal brand? Was it Jeff Bezos said it's what people say about you when you're not in the room?
Absolutely.
And one of the things I talk about when I do my interview sessions over video is I want you doing it standing up.
Mm-hmm.
There are two reasons for that. Number one, your diaphragm is open.
Right.
Two, when I'm standing up, I can use my hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more difficult. Like right now, I'm sitting and and I want the camera far enough away from me so that you see me in a way in which you see my natural expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I commonly joke the fact that my son had an Argentinian soccer coach who was of Italian descent.
Mm-hmm.
And Fernando. And the first time I ever went to Italy in the 90s, and I came back and I went, Fernando, I now understand you, as I'm shaking my hands up and down, because every cab driver was just like you with all the hand gestures. And because in the key pieces, that's part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's more difficult, particularly in the past when we've talked about personal brand, we've talked about, blogging and writing on stuff. But at some point, people got to meet you face to face.
Right.
We are going to run into the situation now where people will interview you and will hire you and never meet you face to face.
And it doesn't matter where they live in the world.
That's right. And so, therefore, that's both a good thing in the fact that the people who can hire you is much greater than your employers in your local geography. But two, it gives you a greater flexibility on who you can work for, but also where you can live.
Mm-hmm.
because I've had several clients in the past who are, in their 50s and 60s, and they say, my husband is retired and I want to be able to travel and I want to keep on working.
Mm-hmm.
Or in my case, my wife and I, we moved to Mexico. And believe it or not, moving from Austin, Texas to Jalisco, Mexico, outside of Guadalajara, I am far lower case of infection rates of COVID-19 here than I would back in Texas.
Right.
And it's like, who would have thought? And so I'm actually, my life is better.
Sure.
But I can be anywhere. And by the way, you're in Chicago.
Right.
I'm in Ajijic, Mexico. And we're talking over Zoom, over the internet. And we're developing a relationship. We have a relationship.
Right.
You couldn't do that 10 years ago, really.
Nope. And it was a challenge doing it 5 years ago because the amount of bandwidth that you may have in your house or how much you were willing to pay for it would differ. But now it's given to you. And in fact, it's always increasing to some degree depending upon who your carrier is particularly using. But just to get down to a couple of other basics before we wrap it up, the idea of coming across your final destination of who are you going to be to the world and how it will come across in video, as we could stay on that in that same lane. What would be some of the deciding factors that might be slightly different, or if they're different, than if you were in person or if you were, doing some other type of transaction virtually?
Well, I still think this still comes down to storytelling and be able to tell your story.
Right.
And be able to tell that story to someone who's not across the table from you. When I worked at Life Size, we used to say, well, it should look like you're just the person was just the other side of a pane of glass, which is learning how to tell your story, how to make eye contact over video, how to be convincing, and which is not the same being in person as being over video. So I'll use the example. I've been listening to the book Storyworthy by Matthew Dix.
Right. And
he's a master storyteller. And there's certain things that you can do that, so when one of the things you can do when you tell a story is switch between past tense and present tense. When you really want to take somebody along into the key part of the story, you switch to present tense. And so it's learning how to be a good storyteller, but doing it over video, which takes practice. And by the way, I used to, when I worked for IBM, I used to coach IBM executives, and I used to tell them the reason why they put bathrooms in hotels is so you can stand in front of the mirror and say every word of your presentation and you look at yourself. So you see your expressions, you see, and so it's learning how to tell stories, it's rehearsing, it is, you're an actor, right? And you have a stage, and it's usually in your house. So how do you want to best present yourself? And it's both the lighting, the audio, but it's also you. And I'll put it quite bluntly, a lot of folks are not comfortable being on video.
And I think, too, people are not comfortable on video, but they also, if they understood all the tools they have available. For instance, like I did a webinar for your membership group.
Right.
I didn't just use PowerPoint. I came with a whole Prezi dynamic presentation.
That's right. And
I had to work that and also talk at the same time. It's a little bit different than working PowerPoint. And this, that you have 3 buttons instead of 1. So you've got to be able to navigate that, but it took a little time to get used to it. But all in all, that's a part of what I want to come across. If I want to make, we talked about salary negotiation, which could be a very mundane topic. And for me to communicate the way I wanted to, in other words, I didn't want it to be boring. It had to be somewhat dynamic. So there had to be some moving pieces, but it was also a risk. And I think one thing that people, when they think of that, they'll think about the risk first and not about the communication value. And I think that's where if people thought more about the communication value, they can possibly make even a better impression when they talk to, whether it's an employer, a recruiter, or a potential business partner, or even somebody that might refer them. Is another side that that just needs to be more discussion about. So that now we want to appeal not just to people who employ us, but how about people that can refer you as well? That if you don't impress them, they're not going to take the next step to refer you. So all of that, think about the tools that could make you and help your communication value increase.
Yeah, one of the things that you can do, I use the example, I had Russ Eanes on my podcast. He's a member of my online community. And I interviewed it. I won't get into it, but he has a very interesting story. And when he was on my first podcast, it was the first time he was really telling the story. And he did an okay job. I did a lot of editing, and he came across quite well. He has since been on radio shows, multiple podcasts. In fact, he was on the Retirement Revised podcast with me, and Russ has gotten good. The more you tell your story, the better you get.
Yes.
And so things like going and asking, get on podcasts. I had one gentleman in my online community he wanted to get into the virtual reality space. And so he got on a VR podcast as a guest to review the Oculus 2 headset that Facebook came out with.
Right.
And several people asked, how the heck did you get on that show? I just emailed the host and said, do you want some help? And they went, you can do that? And the answer is yes. So it's, the example I always give is myself. I'm a very polished professional speaker. You put me on a podcast and interview me, I can go on and on and on. I'm good.
Yeah.
One of the things I discovered when I started my own podcast, I sucked as an interviewer.
That's fascinating. You should say that, because I don't feel like you do. You suck as an interviewer, and I work from the opposite framework. I'm an excellent. I've been told at least I'm an excellent interviewer. I could be better speaking, but I don't. I don't have the opportunity, and I don't think I'm going to have any opportunities coming up, anytime in the next month or so. But all in that to say is that I think people have to be keen in on their strengths and know what they are.
Yep. Well,
and to learn how to translate the strengths to other mediums, as you talked about. Because I was thinking in my head, I said, as a speaker, even speakers don't always translate to the podcast. And sometimes you've got, instead of, they're used to making their presence really big, how do you fit that on a smaller screen? And
Yep.
so, and vice versa. If you're used to a smaller screen, how do you fit that to the larger stage?
Well, I'll give you a couple. By the way, I'm a good interviewer because I can edit out my verbal vomit,
Okay.
which sometimes there's a lot.
To scale back
Yeah.
uh-huh.
The other piece is I will never forget when I worked at Life Size, and I was talking to people on video all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had one business partner up in New Jersey, and we've been talking, and he came to Austin, and I walked on the elevator, and there he was. And he's made two comments to me. You're taller than I thought you were. And by the way, I'm 6'4", so I'm
Mm-hmm.
tall and skinny. And he says, you're younger than I thought. I went, I wonder what that means. And
What did you think, really?
well, it's one of the key pieces. It was the lighting in my room, the lighting in my office, right? And I had typical lighting for an office, and that was all the light came from above.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, we talked beforehand, creates the shadows underneath the chin,
Right.
and which is the 10 pounds we gain on video. I actually looked lighter in person than I did on video.
Mm.
But the key piece there is you need to have someone who can objectively look at you and be honest, playing with your lighting, playing with your audio. One of the things you will see when you're on video, I learned this when I first started presenting, and they would tape us on videotape. And who was my harshest critic? Me.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed everything.
Yeah.
And the one thing I noticed sometimes when I was just recently done some video for several job clubs on video interviewing,
Mm-hmm.
was I found I was stooped over. My posture wasn't great.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I have to do before I get on video? Is I have to do some stretches to make sure I am, because I'm 6'4", I'm 180 pounds, so I'm very thin, and I'm typical. I have a habit of stooping over things.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I have to make sure, like putting my camera up high enough so it's at my eye level. But beforehand, just simply stretch so that my posture's good.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about that on the phone.
No, we don't. And with my personal training background, I can tell you there's another good reason why you should stretch before you sit on a call. Is that more than likely you're sitting on a call for more than 30 minutes at a time, and that shortens your muscle. So the more that it shortens your muscle, the more it starts to restrict your natural posture. So if you stretch for 45 seconds to a minute, that gives you a longer stretch. Then you can, even though your muscles are going to shorten anyway, they'll shorten in a much longer period of time than a shorter time. You don't stretch at all. I can go really deep.
Well,
but all in all, I think that it's a very valid point. Is that you've got to also consider what your natural restrictions are, and understand that you've got to cater to that to present yourself, because that's what you leave people with is all they have.
That's right.
When it comes
one of the things I tell people is right before you get on the call, if you got a flight of stairs, go up and down 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
not enough to get breathing heavy, but enough to get your heart rate and just a tinge of adrenaline.
Yeah. Yeah, that doesn't work for me. I'm just too cool for school kind of guy. Uh,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, you know, my too many doctors they go, "Oh, you're okay," after they take my blood pressure. So I'm, you know, that's about as good as we do. This was a great discussion. This actually turned out better because I think it is important to talk about how the 50-year-old plus can come across in a video, and they may take it for granted now. So, well, you didn't really get deep into how I can get a job. Well, yeah, we did, because we taught you how to present yourself in the interview, essentially, and
Well,
that first impression.
well,
So,
the key piece here is your job as a 50 plus person is going to come from through a relationship.
mhm,
Those relationships are likely to now be built on they're going to be virtual relationships. You may never meet people face to face.
yeah,
So you have to start figuring out, how do I present myself? So one of the last things I want to leave you with is, when I'm doing a lot of video, one of the things I teach people is, how do you frame yourself on video?
mhm,
Do I just see your head, or do I see your whole torso?
mhm.
So one of the things I say is, go watch CNN, your local news. I won't say watch Fox News because I don't like Fox News. And I don't like MSNBC either.
I can understand that.
But watch your local news and notice how they frame people up.
Hmm.
Also, watch one of my favorite is PBS NewsHour, because some of those folks actually have virtual backgrounds, and some of them have real backgrounds.
Hmm.
There's several of the folks who have virtual backgrounds where it's just a kind of a blank, with a logo or something on it.
Right.
Where I want you to look at is right around the ears, because very often that's where the hole tends to show up.
Sure.
And notice you have to look at yourself if you're going to use a simple virtual background.
Hmm.
Or if you watch, what you'll see with a lot of the correspondents, they will be sitting, and there will be a bookshelf behind them.
Hmm.
Notice what's behind these people, because that brands you.
Sure.
Right? So how do you want to brand yourself? And it's not just how you appear, it's the stuff around you.
Hmm.
And so like we started out, this is Hollywood.
Yeah, it is.
And how do you want to best present yourself? And how are you going to develop these relationships without even meeting face to face? Because your next job is going to be dependent on one of these relationships.
Yeah. Let me just tell a quick story. I was on my friend's Tom Spiegel's podcast. I Got Fired. He's an attorney, and of course, I had the setup in a different part of the room, this room particularly, but it was towards a bookshelf, and it was a very messy bookshelf, and even had a bat that says "Eek" on it. Eek Lily in the video, and when I showed my wife freaked out. She says, "You showed that?" And I heard it for the next 30 minutes. Now, it's all up to me ultimately, but the point being is that you don't know how someone reacts to when there's a lot of distraction.
Yes.
And I think, you can see behind me now, there's not a whole lot. You basically see me, and with a few things part of my, and that's different. I have a green screen, which I'm still trying to figure out, but it's all experimentation. But you should ask and or do different things to get different reactions just to see. I wear a hat largely in part because a woman from Australia sent me a audio message via LinkedIn, and she thought the hat was wonderful. And if you see my cover art for my podcast, I've had a fedora on it for many years, and I just started wearing it. And from all the videos from now on, it's going to have one of 10 fedoras that I own uh, on it. But all of that, again, essentially communicates what kind of value people find value in your voice. They value in what you wear. You've got to be sure that that's going to be a part of it, because that impacts the way that you present yourself and communicates your value. Mark, thank you once again for joining me. I don't know how many of these things we've done over the last 3 years or 5 years, but if people want to get a hold of you, and I know the answer, but I'm going to let you tell it, how can they get to know more about you and what you do?
Go to careerpivot.com, click on the contact me button, and it will come directly to me. You'll find Repurpose Your Career podcast on the podcast button on there. And as Mark always says, at all the other fine outlets that you can find podcasts. You can find the Repurpose Your Career book on Amazon. And and I'm being asked to be on lots of these kinds of stuff lately, and I'm going to be on the Career Cloud podcast here in a couple of weeks, and a few other places.
Yep, you are. And I don't. You're not. Do you still write for Next Avenue?
I periodically get things published in Next Avenue.
Okay. I was going to say people can find you Next Avenue as well. Not as much as these days, but nevertheless. The rest of you can join me on my video channel. This will be, you could just look up Mark Anthony Dyson. You should be able to find me there, where you'll see a bunch of these videos this summer, and having fun doing them. And I think it's great. It's become sort of a little news outlet as far as the latest in career news and job search. So thank you very much for joining me. You all have a good day.